Welcome back to Pen and Reel. I'm your host, Uncle Joel, and today we're going to be talking about Future State Immortal Wonder Woman. Now, this has two different stories. The first one written by Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad, and the second one by L.L. McKinney. Now, full disclosure up front. The main reason I am reading this book is because I am friends with Michael Conrad. And we haven't really spoken in a couple of years, mostly because of us moving away from our hometowns and going different directions. But Michael Conrad and I frequented the same comic book store, and we hung out there quite a bit, and we got to know each other. And Conrad was actually doing his own independent comics that he was getting printed and selling locally. And I joined him for one of their anthology collections called C-Sharp Knives several years ago. So he and I worked on some comics together. In fact, one of my stories in that he did the artwork for. And then a few years ago, we kind of went our separate ways. But all that being said, I just wanted to be open about that fact and be very transparent so that it's known that I do have a specific motivation for reading this book, but also wanted to be clear that I'm not going to let that taint my perspective, and I'm going to be honest with my thoughts on the storytelling and not let the fact that I am friends with the author affect my review. So diving into the first story by Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad, I was very interested in this because it seems to be taking an approach to Wonder Woman that I haven't really seen done before. We've had stories of Superman in the far-flung future and that he doesn't age or he barely ages and he lives thousands of years. And though I may have missed it, that's an aspect of her character that I honestly haven't ever seen before. So I was very intrigued to see that being explored here and how they were actually going to pull that off. And on that front, I'm quite pleased with this. I do like the idea of Wonder Woman at the end of time, with Paradise Island surviving and with no humanity left. Mankind has died off, and it's only the Amazons that have persisted. And the book features Swamp Thing, which if you've seen any of my Swamp Thing videos, then you know that I'm a big fan of Swamp Thing, so that's a strong point in its favor. And I've always loved Darkseid as a villain, so having Darkseid feature in this story was a great strength. And I do appreciate Diana's characterization in this story. However, I do feel like the story is a little bit rushed and condensed, but I can't entirely fault the writers for that because this is a future state story and it's only part one of two. So there's a lot that they're going to have to try to cram down into one or two issues. And so really, that's one of my frustrations with Future State as a whole, is so many ideas and stories are being condensed down into such small packages that the writers and the creators aren't actually going to be able to fully explore the ideas that they're putting forth. And so on the one hand, that is a flaw of the story, is it doesn't feel as rich and vibrant and deep as it could, but at the same time, the format is what is hindering them. I don't know that that is necessarily going to be an issue going forward if they had, 6 issues to tell this story, or a dozen, or an ongoing book. So I will say that that does hinder my enjoyment of the story, and I feel like it's not as strong as it could be. However, I'm not going to hold it against the writers for that necessarily. Now, the same creative team is going to be writing Wonder Woman after Future State, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what they do when they have more room to stretch their legs and really grow with the character. But given that this is part one of only 2 issues, it does feel a little bit lacking to me. I like the world and the framework that they're working with. It's just very limited in scope, but again, that's the format that they're forced into, so I have very mixed feelings about it. I would say at this point, I can't really judge Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad's work on Wonder Woman based off of the Future State story, but they wrote her well enough that I am curious to see what they do with her when they have more room to work. As for the art, it is very pretty and has a lot of vibrant colors, but the character work feels a little bit stiff to me. And I'm a little bit curious if that might have affected my enjoyment of the issue. I tend to be far more character and story driven than art driven, but I have found in the past that art has affected my enjoyment of books, so I can't really write that off as a possibility, but I'm not really certain at this point. But overall, I would say that this first story by Michael Conrad and Becky Cloonan is okay. It's not great, but it does show potential for the future. As for the second story by L.L. McKinney, this focuses on a completely different era, with Nubia as Wonder Woman. Now, this is the story that seems to be getting the most attention, I think specifically because of Nubia. And I do think a lot of that has to do with the racial issues surrounding her, but I'm going to completely avoid that topic. I'm more concerned with character and story. And on that front, I think Nubia is presented well. Unfortunately, the story isn't all that compelling to me. I would like to see more of this take on Nubia in her own stories. Stories that really give her the chance to do her own thing and tell her own stories. Whereas this one felt kind of like, hey, here is this new Wonder Woman, and we're going to contrast her with Diana Prince and show you why this new Wonder Woman is different. And while there's nothing wrong with that per se, I'm not necessarily interested in seeing the contrast. I just want to see the stories with the character and have those stories showcase what is different simply by the fact that she is different. Like you can contrast Batman and Superman without having a story that is focused on how they're different. You can just read a Superman book and a Batman book and see, hey, these characters are different. So in that way, I want to see Nubia stories that are focused on Nubia, just doing her thing, and through her doing her thing, you'll learn how she's different from Diana Prince. And this story does kind of do that. It isn't really focused too much on Diana Prince, though she is brought up, which is why I kind of felt that way. Having any focus on the fact that she is the second Wonder Woman or has taken over the identity of Wonder Woman from Diana Prince, I do feel like shines a little bit too intense of a spotlight on that. I am happy to see that Grail features in the story and that they're not just doing away with the character. I feel like Grail has a lot of potential. Unfortunately, the story is very typical, collecting these artifacts. Nubia has to stop Grail from collecting all of them, and it's a very basic, common trope. But at the same time, I am going to be a little bit forgiving of it because, similar to the first story in this collection, it's only issue 1 of 2, so there's not a lot of room for them to do a lot else. And I think that's going to be kind of my stance with a lot of Future State books, is that I'm going to be more forgiving since there are so few pages actually allocated to telling a complete story that I don't think we should necessarily hold it to the same standard that you would for a full 6 to 12 plus issue run. So yeah, overall, I would say both stories are just okay. I definitely enjoyed the Immortal Wonder Woman more than the Nubia section. I think mostly because there was more going on story-wise and there was more different and unique. But I'm very curious to see both of the characters going forward and how they're going to be used in the DC Comics post-Future State. Whereas I felt like Swamp Thing was a definite buy for fans of the characters, I would say Immortal Wonder Woman is not a guaranteed success. Only buy it if you're really interested in the characters. That being said, I did enjoy it well enough, and I'm definitely going to be checking out Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad's Wonder Woman post-Future State, and I'm curious to see what's done with Nubia as well. But if you read the issue, what did you think? How did you feel about the far-flung future version of Wonder Woman? Do you agree with me that the Nubia story is fairly standard fare, but does have potential going forward? Let me know what you thought down in the comments. I'm very curious to hear what you think. Be sure to hit subscribe, and I'll catch you back here next time. And until then, this is Uncle Joel saying, stay tangible.